One of the most basic disciplines or habits we as followers of Jesus Christ need to develop has to do with the way we relate to God devotionally. So today I'd like to talk about some guidelines for having daily devotions or a quiet time. But let me start with some caveats. First of all, I don't prefer or like the term quiet time because I don't like my devotion times to be very quiet. I prefer to speak aloud, to pray aloud, to worship aloud, and so on. I find if I have a quiet time, then they might become very quiet and I might fall asleep. Now, for some of you, you might prefer that quiet time of contemplation. The second thing is, don't be hung up on the idea of daily. Now, the ideal is that we spend time alone with God and in the Word of God every day. But there might be times when there's a crisis or life happens and we have to get on with things, and then we live out of our relationship with God, our effectiveness for God in ministry, and whether we're going to have a good day or not doesn't depend on whether we've had a so-called quiet time, but it depends on our relationship with God. We live out of relationship with God. Now, if you're missing quiet times or devotion day after day after day, that starts eroding your relationship with God, and then you start functioning on empty. It's like the captain of a ship. When there's a crisis at sea, when there's a storm on the ocean or a man overboard, the captain needs to be at the helm and needs to take charge and give leadership and handle the situation. Now, often we might have situations like that which need to be handled, but then we live out of our relationship with God. Now, the issue is we don't try and hear God's voice or build our relationship with God in a crisis. When there is time on our hand, that's when the challenge comes. Will we use that time to invest it wisely and to build our relationship with God? Now, if you are too busy to carve out time for God regularly, then you are just too busy. I've heard it often said that no amount of activity in the king's service will make up for the neglect of the king himself. Make sure we invest time in our relationship with God. The other thing as well is don't become legalistic about the time of the day. I personally prefer the beginning of the day. There's a good case to be made for the first hour of the day. Jesus would withdraw often a great while before dawn. And there's a principle in the Word of God that we give the first fruit to God, the first hour of the day. That works for me. I like to see the daybreak. I like to be around at dawn. Now, in midwinter, that's a challenge because I'm up a great while before dawn. In midsummer here in the UK, dawn is already just after 4 a.m., so that's another challenge. But for some of you, dawn might be the worst hour of the day. You might be at your best later on in the day or in the evening. The issue is to find the rhythm and the time of the day that works best for you. If you're just getting started out on your Christian journey, then a simple way to have your devotions is to use the acrostic acts, ACTS. A for adoration, have a time of adoration before God, worship. C, confession, confess your need of God, allow God to work in your heart, to bring conviction of any things that you need to turn away from. Thanksgiving, thank God for what He's done in your life, who He is. And then supplication, a time of prayer and bringing your requests before God. If you want to develop your devotional life a little more, there's an excellent book available called The Hour That Changes the World by Dick Eastman. The Hour That Changes the World, Dick Eastman. He points out 12 disciplines that you can use in your devotional time. He includes things like meditation and waiting on God, and of course praise and worship and Bible reading and Bible meditation, 12 different disciplines. And he points out if you only spend 5 minutes on each one of those different disciplines, then that's very easy to fill an hour. I personally have a simple default that I go to. It varies day after day, but my simple default is I start with thanksgiving. Number one, Psalm 100, enter His gates with thanksgiving and enter His courts with praise. So when I start my devotions, I thank God and I reflect back over the last 24 hours. I thank Him for the good night's rest I've had, and I think of the day before and any issues that happen in that day, any things that I need to pray into. I give thanks, but that also generates some prayer and maybe some actions. So I pray through the last 24 hours. And then, of course, if I think of that and I haven't had my devotions for 2 or 3 or 4 days, and that brings conviction in my heart to get me back into the rhythm of doing it regularly. Secondly, I guard my heart, because Proverbs 4 verse 23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for out of it flows the wellspring or the issues of life. I make sure I'm in a place where my conscience is clear before God, because that gives me my confidence before God and my confidence in my prayer and so on. The third thing I do is I pray. I go into a time of prayer, and I would have already been praying as I've reflected on the last 24 hours, but then I'd be praying some of the things we have automatic responsibility for to pray. Now, there are too many things to be praying for every day, so I break up my week. For example, on Mondays, I'll be praying for my family. On the days that we have staff meetings and planning meetings, I pray around work-related things. On another day, I'll pray for some of my pastoral responsibilities and the pastoral needs that I'm covering. On Sundays, I'll be praying for church, our church, the services, and the church in general, and so on. Then I'd have my time of Bible reading. Now, I try and follow a Bible reading plan regularly, which allows me to read through the Bible in a year or 18 months, depends how I stick to it. But then there might be other things that I'd be reading. For example, we might be working through a specific book of the Bible in the church, and I'll be reading that plan and so on. But I spend some time in the Word, and then I commit my day to God. I look ahead in terms of the challenges and the issues of the day, people I'm going to be meeting. I'll pray into that. And then I end off by thanking God in anticipation for His answers to my prayers, and that He's going to be with me for that day. And as I close, just let me remind you that you get to know people the best that you spend the most time with. If you want to get to know God, you need to spend time with God. So do the time. God bless you.